Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Good to see y'all. Can everyone hear me in the back okay?
Yes.
Cool. First, greetings to everyone in the hall and greetings to everyone watching us on the live stream at home. My name is Dr. Jake Kopinski, and I'm an assistant professor of musicology here in the Hayes School of Music. I'm also the coordinator of the Music Humanities Community Conversation Series, and I'm very excited to welcome you to this really special event this evening. Since last January 2024, this Music Humanities Community Conversation Series has provided a forum for students, faculty, staff, and community members to engage current issues in the humanities. Through this series, generously sponsored by the Hayes Circle Fund, we have hosted lectures and workshops that explore locally important topics, including the life and history of the composer Twee St. George Tucker, Mexican music and musicians in Appalachia, as well as workshops on Appalachian traditional dance. We've also explored broader topics, including indigenous song and sovereignty, as well as equity in jam-based music scenes. These conversations have drawn together hundreds of faculty, staff, and community members interested in listening and conversing with one another to interpret their lived experiences and musical experiences through a humanistic approach to culture, history, and social life. Tonight, we are really excited to continue this conversation with you all in partnership with the American Musicological Society's Many Musics of America series. This landmark event series shines a spotlight on the richness and diversity of America's musical traditions as the United States approaches its 250th anniversary. This series is partially funded by the National Writing Project and the National Endowment of the Humanities, and is organized with the help of volunteers from AMS's 15 regional chapters. I would like to first take a moment to thank the AMS National Organization and the Southeast Chapter for their efforts in advertising and working with us here in App State to produce this event, and we can just do a little round of applause for them. So when the AMS approached us to have this event with Brian here tonight, there was a clear understanding that Brian's work was relevant to a wide range of areas of the Hayes School of Music and departments across Appalachian State University and many members of our community. So far, students, faculty, staff, and community members have had the opportunity to work with Brian through workshops, class visits, meet and greets, and many, many events to come. All of this is possible due to the collaboration and coordination of a number of different people across the university, including Trevor McKenzie of the Center for Appalachian Studies, as well as Tom Hansel and Julie Shepard-Powell, who I also work with closely there, High Country Humanities, which includes Darcy Gardner and Craig Fisher, and as well as Appalachian Special Collections, including Mark Coltrane and Veronica Wells. And I would also like to note that here in the Hayes School of Music, our staff, Wendy Jerema, Kelsey Bidding, Liesl Doughton, also do a tremendous amount of work publicizing this series and helping us make these kinds of events possible. So again, please, some of you are here, but for all of us not here, a quick round of applause. So, but more to the reason why we're all here tonight. I know we like clapping, that's usually a fun thing to do. Brian and I were talking about this over lunch. We first met when I was a PhD student at Ohio State University. And at that time, we were both working with community members in Southeast Appalachian, Ohio, who were working to document community histories. And one thing that immediately struck me about Brian was his thoughtfulness and his deep sense of care for people, places, and their stories. And this rings true in Brian's remarkable and multifaceted career as an interdisciplinary sound artist who creates sonic encounters that use the transformative power of listening to foster social change. Tonight, we're extremely fortunate to have Brian with us to talk about his work over the past 2 decades, through which he has located important historical recordings that document spoken words and musical performances. Through this work, he has visited archives across Appalachia and the Midwest, including the Berea Appalachian Sound Archives in Berea, Kentucky, the Little Cities of the Black Diamonds Archives in Shawnee, Ohio, and the Thomas Merton Collection in Louisville, Kentucky, including, also not on their list, the Sun Ra Archives in Chicago, I believe. In this talk tonight, entitled Re-Animating the Sound Archive, Harnetty will discuss strategies by which people in the present relate to recorded sounds that document the past. Through listening with people today who live in the communities where the recordings were made, Harnetty has helped these communities understand and respond to their histories. Through this talk, he's going to explore several themes from recordings, performances, and installation products that embed old audio into new contexts, playing illustrative examples from their historic and present-day audio and video recordings. These projects document histories of extraction in Appalachia, social and environmental concerns, as well as contemplative practices. So I hope you will join me in giving Brian a very warm Appalachian State University welcome.
Okay. Well, hello, everyone, and thank you again for coming here this evening. I just wanted to reiterate, I wanted to thank the American Musicological Society and the Many Music Series of America for supporting this talk, along with Appalachian State, of course, the Music Humanities Community Conversation Series, and the Hayes School of Music for hosting me this week. For this talk, I thought I would begin with a recording, and not just any recording, the very first one. Okay, that's it. I wanted to open this up for 1 second and just ask you a question. What did you hear?
Bees.
What'd you say?
Bees.
Bees. Oh yeah, it did feel like it had that buzzy quality to it. Yeah. What else did you hear?
So someone singing?
Yeah, someone singing. Yeah.
Humming.
Yeah, and humming. Yeah. You were saying something too?
It's very had a little lamb.
Oh, no, it's a very famous tune, a French tune, Clair de Lune, right, okay. Yeah. And just like you said, it has like a melody in it that you can pick out, right? Here's the tune, it's Au clair de la lune. And I'm curious about this recording, not only because it was the first one made in 1860 by Edward Leon Scott de Martinville, but also because of the many sounds it contains. So, as you've said, you can hear and make out the melody, even though it may be a little slow and distorted. That, I would say, is the main thing de Martinville was trying to get across and to communicate and to share. It is the signal. But I also hear all kinds of other sounds too, noises. I hear scratches, crackling, perhaps some bees, a needle etching into paper, the warble of the voice, and so on. This is the thing that recordings contain that writing, for example, cannot. There is the signal and the noise, and there is valuable information within each. From its very beginning, recorded sound was capturing both, so that the medium, the history, and the voice's grain and texture are rolled into one. Okay, so at this point, I should probably take a moment to introduce myself and to talk about what I do. I am an artist and musician, and I work with sound. Here are a few album covers from some of the projects that I've made. I grew up and currently live in Columbus, Ohio, which has played a big part in what I make and how I make it. I was trained as a classical composer, and over the past 25 years or so, I've opened that up to many other influences and ideas, from the visual arts to anthropology, to folklore, to sound studies, and so on. At the heart of what I do, I've been calling archival performances. This is really just a fancy way of saying that I use archival recordings to make new music from them. A more formal definition might be any embodied interpretation of an archive. But really, it is to simply make something new from something old. This could include an arrangement or a cover of an old song, or a reworking of lyrics. Or it could extend to working with the archival material more directly. Sampling, collaging, and remixing recordings are all new interpretations of older sounds. Now, there's a long history of musicians and artists who work with sampled and pre-existing material, from hip-hop artists today to the mid-20th century tape pieces of Steve Reich, to the early 20th century musical collages of Charles Ives, all the way back to medieval masses. The difference here is that I'm working with more formal sound archives, and the recordings they contain are often of people who have been historically disadvantaged. This means I need to contend with many ethical, historical, and social issues. In doing so, I've learned that an archival performance is not an invitation to take and use whatever you may like. Instead, there must be what I'm calling an archival stewardship, which is a practice of caring for archives that is collaborative and rooted in a community, and in which power, permission, history, and authorship are all considered. Just about 20 years ago, feels like a long time ago, I packed up my car in Columbus, Ohio, and drove to Kentucky. I had been invited by Berea College to go on a fellowship to listen to its Appalachian Sound Archives and make something new from them. Here's a picture of a hallway. Now, I'll be honest, the number of recordings in those archives is overwhelming. In those first days at Berea, I felt paralyzed, and I found myself struggling to comprehend the collections before I even tried to listen to them. I spent all of my time reading everything I could get my hands on. Finally, after a couple of days, the archivist Harry Rice came up to me and kindly said, "Aren't you going to actually listen to anything?" So I gave up and I dove in. I'm going to play a recording for you. It's from Lexi Baker and J.P. Fraley from 1973. It's called "Brought My Friend In." But I want you to pay attention to it and listen to all the sounds just like you did before. There's several things happening all at once. Shortly after the tape begins, a cuckoo clock strikes, and all at once the room erupts with cackles. Amid this banter, the fiddle begins. A melody soon emerges, and a guitarist joins in. Slowly, the din of voices dies down, and the room listens. When the musicians finish playing, the conversation picks up right where it left off, and Fraley is already sounding out the key notes to another tune. Songs come and go and are comfortable against the backdrop of noises and events of home. There are no exact beginnings or endings. Everything blurs together. The conversation becomes music, the music conversation.
That brings more charity here. Play that.
You know how I hear it for the music.
That's been done as relatives, but that's what it is. Well, my relations tell Paige play that Forty Yard Love. You don't care, but play that again.
Yeah, that's good.
That's a good fiddle tune. You remember he used that's his favorite, but I used to go up there and stay all night and he'd have Paige play.
Yeah, he laid on the bed.
That's a good
That's
old
play.
Who was this?
Paige play. Kenny's That's out. All right, I'll tell you.
He's related to you, too.
I know you're fast on
Okay, I wanted to play that whole excerpt because I wanted you to hear how the music sort of organically came out of that conversation. And when I started to listen to field recordings like this, I really thought about how complex that actually is. And in my own training as a composer, I don't think I could come up with something as beautiful or complex at the same time. So I really found something very special in that, those recordings. So this recording and the many others that I listened to revealed so much more beyond the tunes or the ballads. They were capturing all of the other sounds, what I call their noisy memories. As I've moved through the collections at Berea, I was not only learning about the music and its cultural contexts, I was learning how to listen. My time led to many projects at Berea, including this album here, American Winter, in which I brought together sampled archival recordings alongside my own ensemble of musicians and newly composed music. Making these music hybrids became central to my practice, which I have continued for the past 2 decades. But my experience at Berea also showed me that archives are not only composed of documents, recordings, photographs, and letters. They are built of families, relationships, and communities. I also came to realize that the presence and commentary of these people changed me and changed the way that I worked with the recordings. Take, for example, the time I was at a party in Whitesburg, Kentucky at Appalachia. I was visiting my friend Tom Hansel there. Hi, Tom. Good to see you. And I found myself enthusiastically talking to a group of people about the songs found in the Berea archives by Addie Graham and how much they touched me. A woman who had been listening gave a knowing smile and said that Addie was her great-grandmother. Humbled and taken aback, it was at this moment I realized I could not focus on archival materials alone. Here is a recording of Addie Graham singing Drunkard's Dream, which I then combined with my own ensemble. And we'll just listen to an excerpt.
Your dress so neat and clean. This is Drunkard's Dream. I never see you drinking around. Pray tell me where you've been. And are your wife and children well? You used to treat them strange. And have you too them kindly men? How came this sudden change? Last night I prayed the morning cream that heaven sent to me to snatch me from a drunkard's dream of the misery. My Redeemer did face to me. I saw her shaking eyes, heard the babes inside.
Okay, I'll stop it there. Later still, I took this piece and others I made back to Whitesburg to play for Graham's grandson, Rich Kirby. And here's a picture of Kirby and Addie Graham together. After listening, Kirby concluded that he didn't know what Graham would have thought of this new music, but he thought she might be okay with it. I was grateful for this insight. Bringing the recording out of the archive and back to Whitesburg felt like the music had come full circle. After these experiences, I began to apply what I had learned to other projects. In one, I focused on my father's hometown in Appalachian, Ohio, and created an album called Silent City that celebrated it as a mythological place. In another project, I was asked to work in Chicago with the archives of Sun Ra, an experimental musician, composer, and bandleader known for his Afro-futuristic music, costumes, films, and performance. Here is the album cover of this project called The Star-Faced One, with artwork by Damon Locks. I relished this opportunity to work with these archives and appreciated that there were several other artists, musicians, writers, and filmmakers all asked to reinterpret the archival materials as well. I also willingly signed a contract with the archivists and notably Sun Ra's nephew, who held the copyright status on the recordings and who had the right of refusal too. In this brief excerpt that I'll play, called Marshall, you'll hear my own ensemble alongside an archival recording of Sun Ra's orchestra, which was during a rehearsal in the 1960s. Sun Ra is directing and talking to Marshall Allen, who continues to lead Sun Ra's ensemble today at age 100. Past and present bleed together to create both a sonic portrait of Sun Ra and also something new. The video here, made by the artist Joe Deary, also makes use of archival materials, notably the cassettes and reel-to-reel tapes from the archive.
1, 2, 3, play.
This project was an honor to work on, and it taught me a great deal about how to perform an archive. I willingly gave up some of my own control in order to develop an element of trust. It also confirmed to me that there are serious ethical questions concerning the reuse of archival materials, and that one must continually ask who holds the power, and is that power being exploited? These are questions that may not ever be fully answered, but in asking them, it offers a potential path toward an archival stewardship. It was a few years later that I came upon a new project, one that was to once again challenge and change the course of my work and how I related to a community. In 2010, I found myself in a graduate program at Ohio University in southeastern Appalachian, Ohio. I was taking a class on ethnography, which is a way of researching and understanding a place and its people through observation, participating in local events, interviews, and writing. We were on a field trip to visit old 19th century coal mining towns referred to as the little cities of black diamonds. And this is just a simple map here of, there's Ohio, and if I'm looking at Ohio, I wonder if I can, it's in this area right here, southeast of Columbus, is where that is, where the little cities of black diamonds are. The region is known for its early labor history. This is the place where the United Mine Workers was formed in the 1880s. Its economic struggles over the past century, and its long history of environmental extraction, damage, and now recovery. After our field trip, I decided to stay on by myself, filled with a curiosity to drive to the next town. I was drawn to the landscape, which is within what is called the Way National Forest now, and to the people that lived in the region. I came upon the town of Shawnee, which is situated on a hill in the middle of the forest. I was shocked to see not one, but two opera houses standing tall amid storefronts and empty lots. The architecture was distinct, and I couldn't get over the uncanny and familiar feeling I had there. And for contrast, here's an early photo from about 1910. The first person I met on the street said hello to me. We began a conversation, and I told him my name. He said, "Oh, I know your Uncle Charlie. Everyone in Perry County did. He got a lot of people jobs around here when there were none to be had." I was surprised. This was a place where my ancestors and their deeds made me known and connected. I began to return to Shawnee again and again. I started to do research in an archive there too. This allowed me to meet and befriend several residents as I slowly learned some of the many stories from that place. One day, while working in the archive, I accidentally found my grandfather, Mordecai Williams. I was not even looking for him. I opened one of the gray archival boxes and found 2 old leather-bound yearbooks from 1924 and 25. When I opened one of the books to a random page, there he was. Well, this is a funny picture. There he was. He's second from the right. Yeah, he looks very serious, staring back at me with serious and youthful eyes. I still remember that moment of shock and recognition, seeing a person I'd only heard of through family lore. This began an entirely new relationship for me with the town of Shawnee. 2 stories emerged, one of the region and one of my family ties to it. On one trip to Shawnee, I walked into the community gift shop on Main Street. I met the owner there, John Winenberg, and he showed me around the building. I had been inquiring with residents to see if they had any family histories or old tape recordings they would like to share. And when I asked John, he got up and took me to a back room and then into a walk-in closet. After a few moments of searching and rustling, he turned back to me with a single box filled with cassette tapes. And there it is. "Here you go," he said. "It's probably better for you to have these than me. You'll take better care of them." At that time, I had no idea how much these recordings would affect me. The box was old and dusty and did not seem promising. I wasn't even sure if the tapes would still work or if they had deteriorated beyond rescue. But in hindsight, that box of tapes was a treasure trove, sitting quietly dormant in the closet and latent with meaning and mystery. The tapes became the heart of my work in the region, offering a window to the past and a connection with the people in the present, too. For example, John Winenberg and I are very close friends still. The tapes included interviews and oral histories, songs and community events, and groups of elders talking with each other. These tapes formed the basis of not only my dissertation, but also inspired several new music and performance projects. More importantly, they were also a community organizing tool. Over 3 decades, the stories on these tapes informed a new generation of people in the region. The tapes inspired residents to save buildings, communities, and the land itself. Here is one tape, recorded by an anonymous boy in the early 1980s. I composed the music to go with it for banjo, piano, strings, woodwinds, and vibraphone. It is accompanied by photos and video from Shawnee and neighboring towns, allowing us to see daily life and the faces of the residents.
Mary Irvin. I'm going to ask my grandma questions of the old days. Grandma, in the mornings, do you know how many people died? Do you know anybody was in the mornings?
That was the banjo playing of my friend Anna Roberts-Gavalt, a wonderful banjo player. Now, when I first heard this tape, I was confused. I heard the boy asking questions, but I couldn't hear the grandmother's answers. Later, I realized that the boy, who was perhaps 10 or 11 at the time, may have placed the tape recorder next to himself so that we could only hear his voice and not hers. But rather than thinking that this was a flaw in the recording, I now see it as a feature. It opens up a ghost-like space for us as listeners to imagine what the grandmother's answers were, to wonder about her life. The absence of her voice only made my intrigue and curiosity stronger. Okay, at this point, you might be asking this very question. Isn't this just nostalgia? What can archival performance offer beyond nostalgia and sentimentality? And how are they relevant? What purpose do they have? I've struggled with this too, and over the years I've found a few compelling reasons for this kind of work. First, a possible answer begins with turning history into a creative act for the present moment, for right now. I do not have a desire to go back in time, or to make things as they were, or to get caught in a mindset that says the past is always somehow better. Instead, the past becomes a lens, a cautionary tale, a teacher. Second, performing the past also becomes a way to break from our current thoughts and patterns, to see things in a new way. For example, paying attention to overlooked and in-between sounds that can shift our perspective away from nostalgia. In those spontaneous and vulnerable moments just before a song or after a conversation, a new space is opened, one that is human, imperfect, uncertain, and rich with significance. Third, because these performances are always built on relationships, they are doing the work of reaching out and connecting with others. When you approach archival materials earnestly and in conjunction with the community, something unexpected happens. Cynicism and detachment fall away, and meaning and interdependence become central. Bringing archives and relationships together is an opportunity to consider contexts and viewpoints both within and beyond the archive. And finally, I often think about the author and activist Bell Hooks as she returned to her native Kentucky and who spent a great deal of time struggling with this same idea of reconciling the deep feelings of home and place and warning against the nostalgia that only seems to look back and idealize the past. Instead, she used the past as raw material to critically understand where she was from, even as she continued to return again and again to memories of family. It is this balance between my connections to the past and a sober understanding of the present that helps me navigate the stories and lives embedded in archival recordings. It turns out that I continue to work in Shawnee and the Little Cities region ever since my first visit, and that has now been 15 years. It has become an important part of my life and not simply a project. For many artists doing social engagement, this is something that they are unable to do because of the limitations of time. But I have learned how valuable it is, and it helps make the work more meaningful and rich with material that can only come out of long-term friendships. In 2017, I traveled again to Kentucky in search of recordings. This time, I visited the Thomas Merton Center in Louisville, which holds an archive of Cistercian monk and writer Thomas Merton. There he is. In 1941, Merton entered the Abbey of Gethsemane Monastery, located near Bardstown, Kentucky. While there, he went on to write many books and become a celebrated author and spiritual leader. Later, he moved into a small hermitage on the grounds of the Abbey and worked in solitude. I was attracted to the Merton Center, curious to explore the materials of his life: journal entries, photographs, drawings, books, a typewriter. I listened to audio recordings too, of lectures, talks, even Merton's funeral ceremony. I noticed that there was an outward, public quality to all of these recordings. So I kept listening, uncertain. I listened for different kinds of sounds, emotional sounds, environmental sounds, sounds that might betray a field or a room, extra sounds beyond the message of the text. An archivist pointed me to a set of reel-to-reel recordings Merton made in his hermitage during the spring of 1967, very late in his life. A hermit alone with a tape recorder is an odd thing, I thought. The tape began, and I heard something unusual, the first words fired off quickly and without pause or punctuation.
Okay, now I hope we can go on recording like this. I think it will stay down. Good, let's go.
I continued listening, and as Merton talked about the birds he saw and about Samuel Beckett, I heard contradictions in his words. Voice and silence, comment and no comment, perplexity. I heard him creatively making use of the tape recorder. And I heard what the recorder reflected back to Merton and revealed to him. The tapes began to show something to me too, twice removed and some 50 years later. I had an intuition that there was a project present in these tapes, one that might bring together the recordings with music as an archival performance, to bring Merton's interior voice out of the archive and into the world. The project that came out of these experiences is called Words and Silences. Over the next 5 years, I traveled back and forth not only to the Merton archives, but also to the Abbey of Gethsemane, where Merton lived. I befriended Brother Paul Quenin, who, as a young monk, handed Merton the tape recorder to use in solitude. And I got to spend time at the Hermitage, too, where I paid attention to the landscape and listened to all of its sounds. Bells, animals, distant cars, wind, thunder, silence. Here is the first track on the album, which came out of those initial tapes of Merton talking about birds. It features flute, bass clarinet, trumpet, trombone, and piano. And the film is all shot on location at the Hermitage.
Okay, now I hope we can go on recording like this. I think it will stay down. Good, let's go. piece of writing. I wonder how it sounds. Perhaps I'll bet that in a minute.
Okay, I'll pause it there. In Merton's voice, I heard the flatness of Samuel Beckett talks of, Merton's bewildered perplexity, and his curiosity about the tape recorder. I also heard the exposed and vulnerable uncertainty in Merton's voice as he sat alone in his hermitage. And in these moments, with all of their contradictions between past and present, inward and outward, time and space, everything and nothing, I heard them together and moved between them. I heard both unity and multiplicity, and the opposites of the world melted together. As I move toward the end of this talk, I wanted to focus on my latest project called The Workbench, in which I return home to my parents' house in Westerville, Ohio. In this piece, I'm exploring the power of inherited objects from my father, Paul. The archive is not public but personal, a lifetime's accumulation of things my father repaired and cared for. I became curious about the objects and whether they had an agency that we might activate and listen to. Growing up in Appalachian, Ohio, my father repaired mechanical things: watches, clocks, typewriters, radios, and record players. His patience and curiosity with these modest and everyday items, combined with an ability to seemingly repair anything, gave him a mythical status in our family. After my father died in 2021, I inherited these things, along with his workbench. I began to think of the objects as conduits between past and present, living and dead. I began to ask, are there sonic traces of a person embedded in these collected, repaired, and loved objects? The music of the workbench is both elegiac and playful, slowly building momentum over the course of a dozen minutes. Throughout, we hear voicemails from my father where his everyday questions and statements are both open-ended and poignant. At times, we hear recordings of some of the repaired objects too: watches, a brief radio program, static, and a slowly turning music box. The project's video methodically explores the workbench. We see tools, radios, speakers, a typewriter, and many small collections of things. The objects are arranged just so. They reveal how one's personal workspace can become a collection or even an archive of everyday objects imbued with meaning and aesthetic pleasure. At the end, a recording of my father calmly sleeping and breathing in hospice is raw, intense, and dignified. It lends a gravity to the piece and is both shocking and perfectly ordinary. Despite the extremely personal nature of the piece, the recordings of my father become archetypal, sounds that connect to everyone's experiences. As we listen to him moving through the stages of life and death, we are confronting the fundamental issues of what it means to be human and mortal. We'll listen to just a short excerpt of the workbench, since it's a little too long for us here today.
call and let you know that we just went out for a long walk, and we finally got back before the rain comes. So thanks for calling, and we're fine, and I hope you're fine too. Bye. Brian, this is Ed. I just want to let you know that I got the surveying equipment repaired, and it's working fine. Give me a call if you can. We'll see what else we can get into.
Okay, I'll stop it there. This final project brings me full circle. I return to where I began my life to re-listen to the sounds I was born into and grew up with. And yet, as with all of my projects, this was not a purely nostalgic or sentimental endeavor. Instead, I learned that attentive listening to the past of seemingly trivial details, from my father recounting everyday moments, might reveal something to us right now, a way to feel and think deeply about ourselves and others, and to work toward making our relationships and the places where we live more meaningful. In all of these projects with archives, my task as an artist and composer has been to listen to recordings, to marvel in their sounds and voices, and then to follow their stories to see where they lead me. Each tape, record, or field recording is an adventure. It also means understanding communities and places through sound, where I meet everyday people and learn about their extraordinary lives. Now, my core values, including a grounded curiosity, openness, and empathy, are embedded in this practice, and they course through each interaction I have with others and each listening experience. This also means that I am always working to find ways to compose directly from my own life, to not make music about a subject, but to be in that subject and to respond to it candidly and fully. To find sounds that I love, get as close to them as I can, make something new and raw and unrefined and imperfect and beautiful with them, and then to pass that along. Over the years, I saw that to perform an archive, one need not be comprehensive, authoritative, or even professional. Instead, this process is subjective, flawed, and personal. Likewise, one can lightly hold on to an archive without possessing it, and there is no single correct approach, but many. When combined with an archival stewardship, the materials are brought to light in new ways. And then finally, even our own actions are brought back into the fold of an archive, or perhaps more accurately, into the fold of our shared lives, world, and universe even, contributing to its continual movement and expansion where it never finds its end. Thank you. So, yeah.
Yeah. We have a lot of time for questions, actually, about 15 minutes. I'm happy to get us started off with one. One of the things that I really loved about your talk, Brian, is just how methodical you were with kind of giving us like different ways that your method kind of unfolds, right? From beginning to get to an archive to meeting people and all of these different facets. And one thing that was kind of struck me was that you didn't necessarily talk a whole lot about the music you made. You had a little bit of that.
Oh, yeah.
And
that's because this stuff is just so fascinating.
It is. And I agree with, I think the music is great, but one of the things that I'm thinking about in that I came back to as I was thinking with you is that the music kind of creates this new context for things. And that got me to the question that I wanted to ask is you're kind of outlining, I think, a few different ways that your work is functioning. Like you're wearing a lot of different hats, and I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how you see yourself as like the creator of a context or maybe the curator of a context, and how that maybe shifts as you're thinking, like, you look at stuff that's historical, but then you're also creating a context that brings people together in the present. So like the different kinds of work you're doing and how you see that, or maybe qualify that. Are you creating context? Are you curating context? Are you creating history? Or are you curating history?
Yeah, that's a very big question. I think all of what I've shared with you today is really the material that I work from. And so when I'm thinking about the music, I want to make something that is complementary and that doesn't get in the way of the archival recordings. There's many examples of people using archival recordings, but for me, I've always had this practice of trying to get out of the way and not overwhelm it too much, which means sometimes that the harmony, for example, is pretty static. Like I'm not doing a lot of acrobatics either, or it's not very virtuosic playing. And all of those choices are intentional because I want to give a certain kind of space musically for the archival recordings to exist. I mean, they already exist well on their own, but this is under that other context. I think the other thing that the music taps into is affect and emotion in ways that maybe the speaking voice doesn't always do on its own, or again, maybe they're complementary. I do think of moments like, for example, when Merton is speaking, you can hear a certain vulnerability in his voice, and it touches me every time. And I wanted to highlight that and bring that out in the music itself. So each time I'm composing something, I'm trying to find the right context for the archival recordings. Yeah.
In the Merton video, I saw one shot in there of like two trees in like a grove. Is that an archive, an image taken from Merton's archive, or is that?
No.
I was looking at that, and it reminded me, weirdly enough, of the scene in Blow Up where they find the corpse, which is very strange.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you, and if not, or if so, do you ever mix new material with the archival material that you bring in besides your music?
I certainly do. With the Shawnee, Ohio project, that's a mix of material from today and then the archival material. But with the Merton project, I was really interested in creating like a background or a backdrop that was all contemporary, where Merton was not there. And then the other part of it was listening to those sounds of his voice returned back to the Hermitage, which I thought was really amazing. And then while I was at the Hermitage, I could understand why the recordings sounded the way they did, because it's a cinder block little hut, basically. So it had that reverberation of that room. So that was a pretty powerful experience in and of itself. So I think it depends on each project. Sometimes I'll use the archival imagery, sometimes I'll use a mix. With the boy example, that was all archival imagery. Yeah, so it just depends on the different pieces. Yeah, for sure. Also, it depends on what I find, you know.
And how close you are to the material with your dad's stuff and opening it and showing it off.
Yeah, with the workbench, yeah, with my dad's material, there's nothing archival there or nothing, you know, old. So it was all contemporary, and I treated the workbench as if it were like, you know, like a ready-made sculpture or something like that. And then we tried to figure out ways to move through those objects, to get close to them and to contemplate them. But I didn't want to like act in it, or, you know, I didn't want myself to be, you know, trying to like play the instruments or something like that, play the piece. Yeah, yep. Yeah.
And when did you first get interested in the archival recordings? Did you just, maybe I missed something, but how did you stumble upon that in the first place and get
Yeah.
inspiration?
Yeah, I didn't really say. I left that out. In the late 90s, I was studying in London composition, and my teacher, Michael Finnessy, is very well known for using found sounds, which he used notated music from all these different places and then created collages out of that. So I became very interested in that, but each time I tried to write in that style, I sounded like I was making bad music by Finnessy. Do you see what I mean? Like, or bad versions of his music. So when I came back to the United States, I was experimenting a lot, and I found that actually the actual recordings of old music contained everything that I was looking for already, all of the noise and the signal together, and that I wanted to use those as material. And then I became interested in many other people who had already done work with that type of stuff. Christian Markley comes to mind, and Steve Reich, and so forth. And as I moved along, though, I realized that there was these huge ethical questions around whether I should be appropriating the stuff or whether it's not right for me to be doing that, which led me down all of these other paths to work with more formal archives and to get permission to seek to not have power over the people that were recorded there, but to do it in conjunction with. And then that led me to working with communities more directly, so much so that by the time I did the Shawnee, Ohio project, I found that certain members of the community were acting almost as like co-creators in a lot of ways. They were helping me choose the material, they were sharing things, and I was returning and sharing that music back to them to make sure that I wasn't like offending anybody or anything like that. So yeah, and that was all mixed up with my understanding of ethnography, sonic ethnography, and the ethics around that as well. Yeah. Sure. I saw your hand first, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm a musicologist, and when I go to archives and listen to things or look at things, I'm immediately thinking in context, right? So if I have my note cards, my outline, and things like that, and I'm always thinking about how this is fit into the narrative that I'm trying to create in whatever research that I'm doing. But I'm curious, as you approach that as a composer,
yeah,
right, and thinking, I mean, you talked about context too, but then are you having compositional thoughts while you're engaging with the archive, like melodic material, harmonic sounds,
yeah,
while you're in that space?
I tried not to. I try to spend most of my time just listening, if that makes sense, and trying to be as open and curious as I can to what I come across. And then again, it's completely relational. So when I talk to archivists, they are the ones that are listening so much to these recordings already, and they have all of these ideas about them, and they want to share, the things that they've heard. Or if I talk to them about an idea or a subject, then they send me down all these different paths. And I have to say, when I first went to Berea, I felt pretty silly because everyone else there was doing research and they knew exactly what they wanted to do. But I had pitched this idea of, essentially coming in to make a new collage of music from the archives. And they took me up on it. And so I didn't know really what I was doing. I mean, I knew about Appalachian music and I had studied it, but I didn't, I felt like a fish out of water. And so that whole process also gave me a certain amount of detachment that allowed me to look at the archive and listen to it from different angles, to pay attention to keywords that I was interested in, like winter or night or traveler or something like that, or to listen to what the librarians were talking about over coffee break, or to walk through the archives randomly, like something might speak to me visually as I moved through it. I had all these strategies of trying to get at the material from these sideways, I guess, at an angle. And that kept yielding all these fascinating results. Sometimes it was completely like a dead end. Another thing I would do is I'd often develop this practice of listening to photographs. So I would ask the archivist to bring out all of these boxes of photographs, and then I would try to imagine what the soundscapes were of those different places. And so they're kind of unusual strategies, but they were very helpful in sort of disrupting my normal way of thinking. Yeah.
Sorry, just one follow-up to that.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. So you're thinking about the soundscape of the photograph. Do you have a sketchbook? Are you writing things down as you're thinking
Yeah.
and looking at it?
Yes, I always writing things down. Yeah. And then even now I'm still going back to those books from Berea, and trying to remember what I listened to and how I listened to it. And then I am using composer skills. I mean, I'm writing down melodies. I'm thinking about different key relationships and that kind of stuff, and thinking about if it's a mode or those kinds of things. And I'm also paying attention to timbre and texture, because again, recordings that's what they have in spades, especially field recordings. So I might, really be interested in the grain of someone's particular voice, or the vernacular speech, or any of these, like the cadence of the way that they talk. Those things, in addition to the subject material, what they are talking about. That's the real sweet spot, to try to find those things. Yeah. And most of the material that I work with, I never ends up in a project. There's an example of when I worked in the Sun Ra archives. I asked the same exact question of the other people that were doing projects. One was a filmmaker, Colleen Smith, a wonderful artist and filmmaker. And she saw herself as like an apprentice to Sun Ra. She was just listening to his tapes over and over again, as if she were his student, which I thought was totally fascinating. Yeah, so each person seemed to have their own way in, because the amount of materials each time is completely overwhelming. You could spend a lifetime with each one. So, yeah. Was there another question in the back?
I have a question.
Yeah.
I'm a music therapist, and I think your talk was really interesting for me to hear the way that you use these archives, because in music therapy we often make recordings of our clients for hospice and bereavement purposes. So I think what you're talking about today just brought about so many interesting ideas that I could consider for therapy practice. But I was also curious too about one of the things we struggle with is the ethics of the recordings that we have of clients. And maybe if you could elaborate on some of the practicalities of the ethics, because you've mentioned it many times, and I can hear it too, to be honest, in the music about that space that you described is really there. So I was wondering if you could just say more about that.
Yeah, I mean, in one sense, it follows along the lines of what material I choose. And it has everything to do with that moment Tom is friends with Amelia Kirby, who's that moment when I met Amelia Kirby, the great-granddaughter of Addie Graham. And what happened was there was a audience shift in my mind. I was no longer writing purely for myself or for like some, I don't know, classical music world or something like that. I was writing for the communities that I was working with. Does that make sense? So that in and of itself changed my entire ethical work as well, because the material that I chose and then how I chose to work with it changed. Because I always thought in my mind, certainly for like the Shawnee material, that I was going to come back and play that for people in the town. And I didn't want to like really offend somebody. I mean, it might be possible to, in works of art, of course, that might offend people. That's not a problem for me. But in this particular type of work, I really wanted to make something that they felt like they were a part of, that they saw something that they recognized in it, but then also pushed them into a new place. That would have been the ideal. And that happened. I took Shawnee, Ohio back to Shawnee, and we played in this old theater, and the whole town showed up. And it was really great because they were pointing out their relatives, or like they saw themselves in the pictures or whatever. And I just felt like, oh yeah, it's really about the audience and who am I writing for and why am I doing that? And then as far as your music therapy piece, I also do a lot of work where I'm working with communities doing listening. We did a sound walk yesterday, walking through some of the neighborhoods here in Boone. But I also have an archival piece to that, where I'll often play back oral histories or recordings of people from the very places where we're walking, but it might be from generations before. And so those recordings that you're making have value to them. Yeah, it's just all about getting permission, if you can. I often reach out to family members if the people are dead or long gone, and doing that good faith effort, that's part of that work. And then sometimes it doesn't work. Like there was a compilation that I wanted to put out that some of the sound recordists were not happy with for the things that I was choosing. So I just let that project go. So you have to sort of like really pay attention to that. And as best as you can, I mean, I've got an ego like everybody else, but to try to not let that ego get in the way of those choices, yeah.
How did you find the archives in Berea? Were you requested to come, or did you just find out about that?
Oh, I think that was through Tom again. Man, well, this is true. I owe everything to friends, right? It's always that way. Tom and I met when we were both artists in residence at the Headland Center for the Arts in California in 2005. And then we became close friends after that. And then he noticed that Berea was starting a new archival fellowship program that has since ended, but it lasted for a decade, I think. And I was among the first group of people to come. Yeah. Yeah, and it also involved performers, listening to works so that they might perform them, historians, musicologists, geographers. I mean, it had like a really interdisciplinary group of people. Yeah. Yeah, they were wonderful. Yeah. So, well, thank you all for coming.
Before we go, let us thank Brian Harnetty one more time for being here. Thank you very much.